Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Monday's SASIG webinar. I hope everybody's is well. Welcome to the November weather. It's been pouring down the rain here. In fact, the sun's just coming out, so hopefully we'll brighten up for the rest of the day. So please feel free to say hello in chat. Say where you are, where you what's happening where you are. So I'm speaking to, at the moment, sunny Solihull. But give it another 10 minutes and probably be pouring down the rain again. Good morning to those who've just joined us. Welcome to Monday's SASIG webinar. I hope you're all well and I hope you had a great weekend. Just waiting for everybody to join us. We have got in fact, one of the best registrations for a SASIG webinar. So it might take a couple of minutes for everybody to join us. I'm seeing lots of familiar names popping up saying hello. So welcome, everybody.
We got people from south of France all the way to Edinburgh and everywhere in between.
Yeah.
We have fellow Northerner from Leeds, I noticed that.
Oh, Debbie. Nice to see Debbie.
It looks like, just to say that there's a couple more join us. We're 2 minutes past the hour, so let's make a start. So welcome, everybody. Welcome to Monday's SASIG webinar. Hope everybody's well. Hope you had a great weekend. Hope you're all nice and refreshed for the start of the week. I'm Mike Hughes. If you're regular to these sessions, you have seen me before. The day job is a director of Prism RA, Risk Advisory Services, but I'm also head involved in ISACA both at the local level and international. And it's great to see our two presenters. So welcome today. So Mark Davis and Shaka Hamid from Pentera. So welcome, guys. So just going through the usual parish news. So we'll get the boring bits out the way and get onto our guest speakers very quickly. Quick reminder, I'm sure you're all quite familiar with this now. We are under Chatham House rules, so please bear that in mind, even though it's a webinar. Please take part, put some questions into chat or Q&A, and we'll cover those questions towards the end of the presentation. And don't forget, at the end, there is a poll to give your feedback. Please provide some feedback. It's always good to know what we're doing well, what we're not doing so well, and we do act on that feedback. So please do. And if you if you are got something interesting to say and would like to be presented, then please let us know. We're always looking for good presentations, and don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and keep that conversation going via LinkedIn. Okay, Nadia, next slide. Thank you. Up and coming webinars. So we've got slight different changes this week. So instead of the Wednesday and the Friday, we've got a Tuesday and a Wednesday. And then next week, again, we're running Monday and Tuesday. So please, if you haven't booked on yet and you think those are interesting topics, then please register. Okay, and the next. And the upcoming in-person events. So 1st 11th of June in London. Another London one, 25th of June and 2nd of July. In fact, all these are in London. Again, remember, you need to be a SASIG member to attend our face-to-face meetings. They are very popular, so please book early. The one thing I really want to pick out is the ISACA Shillings Tech event on Thursday, the 2nd of July. And our second members in the Midlands, we are looking to do a joint event, Shillings Tech event with SASIG in October. So watch out for those dates. Okay, Nadia, and the next one. Big SASIG are coming up in September. If you haven't been to Big SASIG before, I can fully recommend it. It is an absolute great event. Those of you who've been, you will know what a great event it is. But please, places are limited. So as they say, book early to avoid disappointment. And next slide. And 16th of July, SASIG UK and SASIG Board Leadership Conference at Aston University. Registrations are open, so please check out the events page for the full agenda. And we've got some great speakers for that full day event. So again, places are limited, so please book early. Okay, and the last one. Big shout out to our supporters and contributors. We can't do all this without them, and obviously a big shout out to Pentera. So thanks, guys, for both presenting today and being one of SASIG's supporters. And I think that is it. So that is all for me. So on to the main part of the business. So welcome, Mark and Shaq. Looking at I think AI is on everybody's minds at the moment, but it's looking really at what some of the CISOs are telling us, which I'm sure is going to be an interesting presentation. So over to you guys, and don't forget, if you got any questions, please put them into chat and Q&A, and we'll cover those towards the end of the session. So I'll come offline now then and let you get cracking.
Thanks, Mike. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar, Closing the AI Security Gap. Today, we'll be sharing the key insights from our AI Security and Exposure Benchmark report based on input from 300 global CISOs. We'll walk through new benchmark findings that point to a clear blind spot. AI adoption is quite widespread. We all know this. Organizations are still lacking clear visibility into where AI is deployed. The skills gaps, legacy controls are being stretched to cover AI-driven workflows. And the most concerning part is there doesn't seem to be a fully defined approach to AI security testing and validation and a standard in the marketplace right now. So before we jump into the technical weeds, kind of a couple of points. So we're not here to simply throw scary numbers at people, but we're here to discuss what we believe to be a map of a new territory. We're using the AI Adversarial Testing Benchmark Report as a foundation for the conversation. And as I said, it's a snapshot of how 300 CISOs in large and complex organizations globally are actually navigating the shift to AI. The goal during the conversation is to share the benchmarks, see where maybe your organization might stand compared to your peer group, talk about what's working, where the common blind spots are, and how we can all move forward with a more validated, evidence-based security strategy. Okay, so very quickly, I'm Mark Davis. I'm responsible for our go-to-market teams here at Pentera. My colleague Shaq is our Director of Security Engineering. And Shaq, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mark. So you may have seen me before on a previous webinar as well, where we talked about continuous threat exposure management. So I've been working in cybersecurity for a long time, over the last few years with Pentera, looking at more around threat exposure, looking at it from an adversary perspective. And yeah, nice to meet everybody. It's good to see a big turnout for this particular webinar as well.
Thanks, Shaq. And yeah, wonderful turnout. Really looking forward to taking you through this content, and there'll be some time at the end for Q&A as well. So we always start with a quote, but for those that aren't aware of SANS, they are the world's largest training provider and advisory source for specific cybersecurity training. And this quote really sums up why we're all here. We're seeing AI adoption move at breakneck speeds. The controls and validation necessary to secure it are lagging behind and not keeping pace. very similar to the emergence of cloud 2010 to 2015. We're seeing the same kind of challenges. There's obviously a clear level of adoption. There's a very evident skills gap, and of course, there's a wild initial security risk with the adoption and implementation that we see. The speed of change is the main challenge here, and our report found that nearly half of those surveyed knowingly admit that the security strategy in relation to AI is lagging. There's top-down pressure from the boards, business leaders not to miss the AI boat, real push for productivity and efficiency. And the challenge here isn't a lack of effort, but it's a visibility crisis. You cannot protect what you can't see. And right now, 67% of CISOs say they have limited visibility into the AI ecosystem, their assets, identities of the workforce, and now with agentic identity being added into the mix, we've got this kind of perfect storm developing. And the adversaries aren't waiting for us to get our governance in order. They're already exploiting those initial blind spots. And we're going to spend today looking at how to stop playing catch up and start actually validating these new attack paths. Okay, so who are we actually talking about here with the survey? We didn't pull the numbers out of thin air. It isn't a Pentera review. It's a survey of 300 CISOs globally in large and complex organizations. But what we always see and what we've seen through time, the trends are these challenges are kind of experienced firsthand in the largest global organizations, then cascade their way through the rest of the market. And certainly in our customer conversations, that's exactly what we see right now, regardless of the size of organization. The objective of the survey was to create a real-world benchmark. We wanted to provide an easy way for everybody to see where you might stand compared to your peers across AI security. And we won't bore you with the whole report. It was a fairly extensive piece of work. We've selected some of the most interesting and eye-opening findings that we think will resonate with you as you move your organizations forward. Okay, so Shaq, we have a poll just to get everybody's juices flowing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we should have all of the poll questions pop up on the screen now. So the question is, how mature is your organization at AI adoption? And so, Mark, you just covered the point around we're moving at breakneck speed, and obviously the adoption crisis, if you like, if you want to call it that, is real. Some organizations are ready and embracing it. Others are playing catch up. But where would you say you are in terms of that maturity in adoption? And we know things like the AI EU Act that are coming in later this year, other things that are impacting the governance, the controls, the security around that as well is a big concern. But it'd be really good to get everybody to I guess throw their 2 cents in as well. Feel free to follow up with any kind of commentary around that maturity as well. Where do you see that maturity?
And just while we're waiting for those answers to come in, it's important to remember that AI isn't landing into a fresh greenfield. It's been layered on top of an incredibly complex environment already that is stretched to the limit. We look at tech, we look at the controls and governance in place, and we also look at the kind of the talent and the skills area as well. And as you can see here, 40% of those surveyed are managing a stack of more than 50 different security tools. In many instances, we see much more than that, and I'm sure you have your own kind of your own view of those numbers. But the report highlights that the sprawl is only getting worse, with more than half of the CISOs reporting that their total number of tools actually increased over the last year. And that tool increase leads to a massive amount of noise that teams already have to fight their way through every single day. And that only compounds when we look at that kind of visibility into the AI security gap.
Yeah, Mark, just to comment on that as well. What's really interesting, I was at an event with CISOs as well. So to support the survey, um, the evidence from the CISO side is that they're just overwhelmed with the number of requests around AI adoption. It's not just an IT problem; it's a company-wide issue where everybody is now, I guess, empowered, enabled to deploy tools, and really that control becomes much harder. It's trying to review every request, every system, every application that uses AI is a huge responsibility. And so the organizations are managing that in different ways from, I guess, a policy of zero tolerance in terms of applications that use AI to embracing it and adopting it. And so we've got the results just come in. So AI is deployed in specific teams and workflows is the top answer at 41%. Then the others are running a few pilot projects, just exploring, researching use cases, and AI broadly integrated across the organization in the low numbers. So, there seems to be the big one seems to be deployed into very specific teams or workflows, which kind of is what we're seeing as well, that there are specific use cases that are being looked at, early research, early pilots, understanding the technology as it's evolving as well. In real time, we're seeing the AI technology itself is getting better, it's improving, and people are still figuring out where it fits in with existing business processes and applications. Interesting.
Yeah, and the one thing that has remained consistent through all of this is that the security teams and security practitioners remain accountable for the security posture of the organization, but are becoming ever more dependent on other teams, other parts of the business, to help with, best practice, governance, controls, uh, and also in some instances the kind of the remediation effort as well, as we kind of get into the maturity of deploying these tools. So it's a complex environment. It's becoming ever more noisy, and we don't see that changing anytime soon.
Yeah. Great. Let me just move on to the next slide.
Okay, so this was kind of really an interesting theme that came out of the survey. So we know from the responses that the funds now to deal with this are there. So on average, the enterprises that we surveyed are talking about an annual budget of about 1.84 million. Now, that isn't just about tools and software, that's also about programs. That's in some instances resources, headcount, etc. So that's the overall security budget that some of these respondents shared with us. So we know that the funding isn't necessarily the challenge. Uh, But despite the funding being there, 75% of organizations have still had to deal with an attacker inside their environment in the last 2 years. So this creates a massive question mark and challenges from the board as well, and kind of non-technical stakeholders around how this budget's being deployed. And it kind of suggests some of the themes that came out is while we're checking the boxes for compliance, insurance purposes, the traditional approaches of validating security isn't stopping the modern breach. So if it isn't funding, what is the challenge? We look at whether the 12% of the annual spend within the AI context is actually giving a true attacker's perspective of how these tools, the adoption within the organization, but also the way the threat actors are adopting AI is actually giving us is giving us any bang for buck whatsoever. It's becoming quite a challenge to be able to take that budget and translate it into real security outcomes.
Yeah, Mark, I just noticed that we missed the 223 not pounds, but K. So that's £223,000 in terms of that budget.
Thanks for clarifying.
No, not million. It's a million. No.
Cheers. Next slide, please.
Okay, so let's just move to the next one. Oh, sorry, jumped ahead. There you go.
Okay, so we'll take a quick break from the bar charts. Now, no prizes for anybody that can guess which lever we pulled to create the image. But everybody knows that AI is becoming a top priority within the market. We follow the money that we've just seen. The maturity just isn't there yet. And 78% of your peers are funding AI security with broader security budgets. So it's been treated as an add-on at the moment, not a standalone pillar. Lots of the conversations that we've had with CISOs in CISO forums, but also in our customer conversations, is that's got to change. You know, they're all of our respondents, but all of those conversations are revalidating their approach to the traditional approach and legacy approach to security. And if you look at the tools now that are starting to be deployed, only 11% of organizations have that dedicated AI security tooling today. The vast majority, 75%, are just taking existing tooling, so endpoint, cloud tools, etc., and trying to stretch them across the AI landscape. So we don't want to lead the witness, but it does feel like a little bit of a deja vu moment and those early days of cloud that we referred to before. We tried to protect the cloud with traditional firewalls. There was challenges there, and obviously the evolution of new tools to help us to be able to do that started to become very prevalent. 33% of CISOs admit now, and in this survey, that they have no security controls in place for AI at all. So it's clear that we're still treating this like a novelty rather than the mature part of the enterprise that it will quickly become.
Yeah. Just to comment on that as well. So effectively a whole new attack surface, although, you know, some of the traditional IT cloud being one from an infrastructure point, but there are new attack surfaces where we talk about data, where that data potentially sits, the kind of the processing that happens, the privacy element, and the future in terms of how we see AI is looking at it as an attack surface in its own right. And I think, you know, once we start to see it in that way, it has its own shape and form that helps us understand impact around people, around organizations, and obviously data breaches and attacks that would happen off the back of that. So, like you said, the early days of cloud, there was security was very immature, and going back, before that with firewalls and EDR and endpoint, that traditional security does a good job for that attack surface. And we're still going to see an evolution of the security landscape when it comes to AI. It's evolving, it's starting to mature, but there's still a lot of work to do. Right.
Okay, so if we look at how AI is actually landing inside the organization, and I think this came through in the polls before, the eve of AI is over. 100% of enterprises that were surveyed have already adopted AI in some capacity or form, but the maturity of that adoption tells a much more interesting and fragmented story. So the 82% of organizations that are still in that select teams phase, I think that was the strongest category from the poll earlier on, but only 18% of those have actually reached a state of broad adoption when it comes to AI, and it's the same approach to tooling. In the same vein, the internal governance at a more micro level and the legislation at macro level is trying to play catch up, and even cyber insurance now is starting to make changes. Providers have moved away from a simple checkbox application to evidence-based underwriting and treating AI as a risk multiplier or even as an exclusion. or a separate point. And actually, in the last event that we attended in Manchester, one of the insurers that was present on the panel was actually talking about this specifically as well. And many policyholders now, at a rate of about 50%, are being required to actively pen test AI infrastructure. And we really are seeing now that point in time, because of the speed of deployment and what we call the security decay line, is accelerating. So that point in time and everything being kind of checked, we used to look at it and say there's a general cycle that we see of maybe weeks and months between that initial point in time and that check. Probably needed to, in real terms, to manage exposure effectively was about a 3-month cycle was sensible. We're actually seeing that security decay line now and the requirement for continuous exposure management and validation being in the days and the weeks already. And as we've said, and the theme throughout is the pace of acceleration and the pace of change is something that's really creating material exposure for organizations of all sizes. Because the gap is where the risk lives. So this is the beginning of the trend where implementation is moving way faster than organizational governance and strategic oversight. The benchmark report highlights that even though everyone is using AI, 67% of leaders admit to limited visibility. We're dealing with a massive wave of shadow AI, where select teams are moving fast, but security doesn't have the full understanding of what's built, what's deployed, and what those use cases look like. So that classic case of adoption outpacing protection. Next slide, please, Shaq.
Yep.
Okay, so what we have here is the friction point that we call it. So competing interests across the organisation, across the board. 67% of those surveyed are openly acknowledging that they have significant issues with AI visibility and governance, which loosely translates to over half of the folks have accepted additional risk for the sake of getting to market quickly with their AI applications and use cases. But it's creating those blind spots that we've referenced. Security teams just cannot defend against soft spots that they're not fully aware of or enabled to protect from a tooling or a skill set perspective. Shaq, do you think it's a conscious gap or a scenario where organizations have just unintentionally found themselves?
Yeah, I guess in terms of it's where organizations have found themselves, just because of how quickly adoption has started. As you mentioned, that sort of governance gap, we're playing catch up, but it's definitely if you were to go wind the clock back maybe a couple of years. It would have been really hard to predict where we are now. Everything's changed. AI has been a massive disruptor in every field. I would say in cybersecurity is not alone in that. It's impacted everybody. But if we've been able to predict it, we'd be in a different scenario. But it is that kind of technology that's been very, very disruptive.
Yeah, and actually the sentiment that came through from some of the interviews that were conducted for this study is a feeling that we're treating this like this lag like a temporary phase, but without a clear map of the systems moving forward and those adoption cases, that gap just widens over time. So to move forward, the view is that organizations now stop accepting limited visibility as a status quo and start bringing AI deployments back under the same rigorous oversight that we're using for the rest of the enterprise infrastructure. And the takeaway is that effectively 100% of the respondents don't have the coverage and visibility that they want. Maybe not many surprises there, but when you kind of hear it from this audience, it's quite a stark position to be in.
Yeah, and I think the other gap here is a skills gap as well. It goes hand in hand, with understanding the landscape, the security implications, and the tooling, the right tooling that's required. There is definitely a big difference in terms of people that are very mature, and those that are sort of at a very early stage. A lot of organizations are now seeking out those kind of skills, understanding of the threat landscape, and that's equally important as well.
Absolutely. And if we look at the maturity now, which this slide talks to, we know that the AI applications are being rolled out at the record pace that we've already touched on. The infrastructure and the teams supporting it are still trying to get up to speed. And the most telling point really that came out of the survey is that only 11% of those surveyed have actually invested in dedicated tools specifically built to secure AI. And this is an awareness piece as much as anything else. The market is essentially trying to force fit or adapt tools and controls to cover an entirely new category of risk. And as the report continues to highlight, the make-do approach is a primary reason why a third of enterprises have no specific security controls for AI at all. So we'd all be questioned on a program that didn't have a dedicated line item for identity or endpoint, and yet that's exactly where we are with AI today. So we're treating it like a novelty, and we should be treating it as a mature part of the enterprise attack surface. But on a positive note, 21% of the surveys, they do expect a dedicated line item in the coming year. So this hasn't crept up on people. These conversations have been taking place for certainly the last 12 months, and we're already now back to the budgetary point, seeing the budget being made available by boards to start to fund the initiatives to close this gap.
Great stuff.
Okay, so when we look at who's actually in charge of these systems, it becomes clear why governance feels disjointed. So just over half of the respondents are operating under a shared responsibility model. And while that might sound like a comprehensive approach, in practice, it yields a disjointed ownership and ultimately an ownership gap where everyone's responsible but nobody's accountable. And this leaves critical aspects and functions unaccounted for, as everyone assumes someone's got it covered. Only 1 in 5 organisations assigning accountability solely to the security team in this survey. And that highlights that we're seeing a real gap in end-to-end oversight, and that fragmentation is a primary driver for operational risk. And we're starting to see this already now make its way to corporate risk registers as a high priority initiative. Shaq?
Yep, we have another poll. So the question, and in a second, Nadia will pop up the poll. So our second poll today is: how is your organization currently addressing the AI skills gap? So we talked just now about the skills gap. Obviously, there is a tooling gap or a maturity in terms of tooling as well. That goes hand in hand with making sure that we're adopting the right methodologies, have the skills to close that gap as well. So if you can answer in the next few seconds, and we'll close the poll and see where everybody is.
And just while we're doing that, kind of talking through the slide that's up, you can see here that the biggest challenge now is no longer funding. When we look at the primary obstacles facing organisations, only 17% of CISOs pointed to the budget as a top concern or roadblock. So this kind of speaks to, Shaq, your point of what actually is it. The real struggle for half of the market is indicating that gap in technical expertise. And that's on both sides of the cyber fence. Subject matter experts to implement, operate, govern and secure, and those offensive security practitioners capable of effectively validating the implemented security controls in those live production environments.
Yeah. I would say the upskilling as well is awareness of, let's say, the legal and compliance and governance piece as well. It all starts there, and before we even implement tools, we need to understand the risk. We need to understand the scope of what AI impacts across the organization. So that skilling feeds into a lot of strategic, if you like, decisions, and it always starts at the top. So I think we can probably close the poll and see if we've got some results. So our top answer is encouraging self-learning on the job experimentation. I like that. So we got 64%, like we do in cyber, and I feel like that's always been the same in cybersecurity as well. We are always moving at breakneck speed, even looking at adversaries, looking at things like attacker behavior. If we take what we do at Pentera as well, we are always building capability and learning on the job, if you like, and the same applies to the addressing the skills gap. It is being thrown in the deep end, if you like, Mark, and learning as we go. Some formal training and certifications and courses, and I think that's coming along. So that's kind of the next, I guess, answer that was 21% of people answered. So training, it has its place. I feel the practical or the sort of learning with real systems, real problems is important. It's applying what you learn during the training and certification process. Certifications alone are not going to get you there, but they certainly support that initial process. And interesting, in terms of hiring expertise, because is the lowest answer on there. So not seeking out expertise necessarily in all cases externally, but these days it's there's a lot of information out there, so it makes sense that organizations are skilling up internally.
It's an interesting point that sits behind this as well. So I think it was a third of CISOs, and I've noticed a few comments coming through around kind of formal training, mandated training. But actually, I think, but in the back of the survey, I don't think it's on this slide, but a third of the CISOs pointed to actually uncertainty in the testing methodologies. So not just testing from an offensive point of view, but actually in the kind of testing and training of what those use cases are to be able to build programs and kind of training modules for staff and colleagues as well. So yeah, I'm not quite sure how that was going to progress, but that was an interesting point that came out.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's quite a few comments that have come through, so we'll try and get through those points and questions just at the end of the presentation. Okay, so our AI novelty and unknowns lulling us into a false sense of security. So there's a striking disconnect between the technical gaps we've discussed and how we actually feel about our readiness. When those surveyed were asked how they would report the state of AI to their CEO, 78% of security leaders said they felt somewhat confident in their ability to defend that AI ecosystem. Which at first glance feels like a positive sign, but then you consider that most of us are still struggling with basic visibility and specialized tooling. It makes you wonder how we are actually measuring that sense of security. As in, are we applying pre-existing controls to AI, or are they assessing from an attacker's perspective in a true control testing exercise? So there's a kind of another poll, and this is always an interesting question about the level of confidence in AI security.
Yeah. We've got another poll up as well. So we've got our last poll for today around what's your level of confidence in AI security. And so if you make your way to an answer, and while we cover that off. So interesting point on the research report that we carried out as well suggests that AI is so new, many teams haven't yet mapped out the actual attack paths. So it's still trying to understand the impact. When we talk about data leakage, we talk about internal systems, I guess a public exposure, where that data lives, all of those kind of things. We're still trying to figure out a lot of those things in some cases. Depends on what systems are being adopted. Debbie's raised some interesting points as well around the training aspect. Sometimes training itself isn't up to par. It isn't up to scratch. It can be very basic. It can be just mandatory, a check in the box, if you like. We see that in the world of cybersecurity as well when it comes to testing and validation. Sometimes it's not addressing the real issue or the real problem or the real, if we talk about training, the real understanding of what is the gap. It is just a tick in the box, unfortunately, and that doesn't get anybody anywhere. And so there is a maturity from an organization perspective. Are we addressing the real problem here, or are we just moving along for the sake of compliance and for, I guess, making sure that people are meant to be doing what they're meant to do? So we got our answers through for poll 3 as well. So how confident are you in terms of the AI security? And yeah, so we got a really good answer, or have we got a really good answer? Really bad, in the and it's kind of what we'd expect, in that there is a problem around the confidence in trying to figure it all out, which is expected. It's because of the technology and where we are. One of the other interesting points that was just raised is that everybody's an expert as well. Everybody has a view about what AI is in their world, and that could be, from senior management all the way to somebody that's helping run the business in their part of the world. I would say, in every department, that there is, AI creeps in to help automate, to help build structure around how they do their work and the tools that they might use. So there is a huge, I guess, fight internally to try and sort out the noise from what actually needs to be addressed as well. I think the lowest answer was we had 3%, so only 2 respondents that said very confident. So I'd love to speak to those people to see what how they've approached it in terms of the skills gap, in terms of the tooling, the governance and data piece as well. I think that says a lot about maturity. We talk a lot about cyber maturity in our world around cyber and tools. It's not just about implementing tools. Gartner came up with a really interesting term when they introduced CTEM. They talked about gear acquisition syndrome. And the gear acquisition syndrome, and my boss, who is a scuba diver, said just having more gear for scuba diving doesn't make you a better scuba diver. And he said, yes, it does. No, but it doesn't. And the reality is that throwing more tools at the problem doesn't fix the problem. There is a training element, there is a knowledge gap, a skills gap. All of these things go hand in hand. And there is a maturity that we talked about, maturity in the use of those tools and understanding of the output and what they give you as well. Great.
Yeah, it's an encouraging level of confidence, I guess, is what we would take away. If we map that with the lack of visibility, then it's good to understand and accept that there are gaps, clearly, but then the work to actually define what those gaps are and how to address them is going to be a really interesting area to explore, certainly over the next few months.
Yeah. And so just go on to the next slide. Right, just talking about a case study. So just sharing an example around how AI can be leveraged from in our world, looking at it from an adversarial perspective. So we know that a lot of attacks come in through things like phishing emails, usually landing in the inbox, if you like. These days, a lot of spam and emails and content is created using AI. From our perspective, this is an attack scenario that our offensive security services team carried out against a large global organization. We do have a service capability beyond the tooling, looking at red teaming, tabletop exercises, emulating adversarial campaigns to really help stress test those gaps we talked about in terms of maturity around tooling and then skills. And so the idea is that once we gain access to a mailbox, syncing with an AI platform of some sort, so a lot of these things are interconnected, we can start to gather interesting information about how those systems could be manipulated if there is that bi-directional connectivity, allowing, for example, an injection of a prompt of instructions within that email. So we think about traditional sort of prompt injection, already calling it traditional prompt injection, but through an email, being able to create specific commands or execution via the inbox, and being able to then get to something interesting internally within the organization. So that these new attack surfaces are emerging, and certainly from our side, it's something that we can help test in terms of that resilience, not just from a tooling perspective, but also from a system and process and people perspective as well. Okay, so just moving on to the next slide. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Jack. So we often talk about AI security as a future problem. The data shows it's already arrived. If there's any surprises there, although clearly there still is in some instances. But when looking at the broader threat landscape, we talked about how 75% of organizations have dealt with an impactful security incident in just the last 2 years. What is most telling, however, is that nearly 1 in 5 of those organizations reported that the attack directly impacted their AI infrastructure. And examples like that, and the narrative discussed here today, warrants a little bit of a kind of wake-up call. We're seeing that attackers aren't just using AI to write better phishing emails, for example. They're actively arming themselves with new AI-backed capabilities daily. They're also actively targeting the models themselves, the agents, and data pipelines. So seeking out every opportunity, every opportunity and high impact path to compromise.
Just something else, from a report perspective is that, we're likely in the calm before the storm. I don't feel that there's ever been calm, right, over the last sort of couple of years, with the sort of breakneck speed that they've been traveling at. Right now, there's often secondary impacts around adversaries get more comfortable with the AI ecosystem, if you like, the infrastructure around it, being able to use it for their gains as well, and being able to look at it from a sort of a targeting perspective as well. So we have to treat these systems as high value assets today. So if we're talking about what we're protecting in terms of the crown jewels, rather than waiting for the number, for CISOs reporting the impact on their infrastructure, we want to get ahead of that. Being able to test systems, as we talked about, and processes and all of those things become important. We want to get ahead of that, rather than seeing a lot of bad headlines, right, in the news.
Indeed. Yeah. Next slide, please, Shaq.
Yeah.
Okay, so where do we go from here? Right now, because of the speed of AI adoption, no signs of slowing down. There's the kind of like that deployment that we saw in the survey, but also in the responses from the poll earlier on. It's happening in silos. The use cases are in silo. Sorry, I just have a notification for a reboot on my machine, which wouldn't be very helpful right now. Probably an AI patch that's been pushed out. So the first big shift that we really encourage people to consider is treating AI like any other critical business function, advocating hard to provide funding, staff governance, validation, other critical aspects of the organisation have all got to be considered holistically at a macro level. Jack, what's one of the first things that the audience could do to consider when looking at improvements?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the important thing is obviously the governance isn't about keeping pace. It's leaving it as effectively, looking at the attack surface as something that's untested. We need to not give AI a free pass, and I think it's really important that we question and test, if you like, the security, the guardrails around that. And that means bringing it under the same sort of management that we do with everything else in the organization. Sometimes that adoption and that excitement around what AI unlocks or what it changes in terms of transforming the business takes the lead rather than the security questions follow afterwards. And I think it needs to be other way around. We need to put it through the same processes, mechanisms as we measure anything else in the business when it comes to access to systems, cost monitoring, adoption of cloud or any kind of application or system. We need to treat it in the same way. So I think that's a mind shift. That's also an education. For employees that are very excited, or management teams that are very excited about what AI can bring. It's like just reining it in and bringing it to check, if you like, just like anything else.
Yeah, and we're talking specifically about AI right now, and almost treating the AI like a standalone problem. But when we look at the attacker's perspective, they don't think in silos. They're opportunistic in nature. They look for the easiest path with the highest impact. And with lots of untested AI infrastructure out there, it's possibly the most appealing target for them right now. So that change in mindset, Shaq, that you referred to is critical. Looking hard to investigate all of the paths across an organization, the associated permissions, the AI, not necessarily the governance, but the management, the permissions associated with AI is a critical task. And it can be easy to underestimate the only permissive nature that AI may require to be functional. So that potential business impact is quite the unknown.
Yeah. Yeah, although the attack surface is new, the principles haven't changed. When we talk about hygiene, when we talk about guardrails, security, least privilege, Mark, that you just touched on, all of those principles are exactly the same, and I think it's practicing those in this new world is even more important. Right. Just moving on to the next slide. Where do we go from here? So we've got point 3 and 4. Don't know if you want to cover that off, Mark.
I think we just have.
Yeah. Okay, great. So just to wrap things up, in terms of talking about what we do at Pentera, we have an ecosystem of what we call security validation, looking at attack surfaces, the same attack surface that we talked about today in terms of AI, under the hoods, the controls, the security, the processes, all of those things need to be validated. And when we say validated, what we mean is that what does it look like from an adversarial perspective when we start to challenge controls in terms of access, when we start to look at data potentially that could be vulnerable to a ransomware attack, the crown jewels, wherever they might sit internally. The way I like to phrase the internal and the external attack surfaces, that the internal is usually very squishy. Once an attacker lands inside the network, they have access to a lot of things. And that's where security can start to fall down a little bit. The exterior, think of it as a hard shell. From the outside, we have, firewalls that protect a lot of those services, those systems, those applications. There is an element of risk that things can, from time to time, be exposed from the outside, and we want to catch those quickly. When we extrapolate this to AI, the same applies. A lot of the internal systems that might be overly permissioned to access data when we talk about AI, and when users and roles and permissions, identity, if you like, again, have access to more than they should, those things need to be tested. And so the way we look at it is, from a tooling perspective, if you like, we have the platform that can give you coverage of those internal and external systems. To bring all of that together, we also need to be able to fix what we discover. And so one of the biggest challenges that we've seen over the years is that security teams are really good at finding problems. We're really good at identifying a vulnerability in our world, that it can be exploited, and we can reach the crown jewels, if you like, from a ransomware perspective, or we can bring down systems or disrupt systems or affect operations. And we can prove that, with using security validation as well, we can improve that quite easily. We know that things need to be fixed. Trying to implement that change can be really difficult, because we've now got to throw that over the fence to whoever owns those assets, the system owners, the applications owners. They may not necessarily come from a cybersecurity background, although these days security is baked into a lot of IT functions and the way we design things. If you think about secure design, all of those things there is an awareness that, and there is certainly a need and a want to be able to make sure that things are done properly, but we're still reliant on somebody else fixing the problem. So to bring that together, we talk about Resolve. Pentera Resolve is about now that end-to-end workflow of not just identifying problems, but being able to get somebody to fix them, to have ownership of the problem. And that means integrating with the same systems that IT people, infrastructure people, system owners, application owners rely on, when it comes to ITSM tools, ticketing systems, workflows around emailing, Slack, Teams, all of those kind of things. So for us, that final piece is about integrating into those systems to prioritize what's really important, what we've discovered across the platforms, and be able to fix them. I think we're kind of hitting the end of time, and maybe we've got time for questions, Mike.
We've probably got time maybe for one, maybe two. There's been a lot of comments in chat, so please pick that up. So first question really is, how much of trying to secure AI reveals that the basics of cyber hygiene are not yet in place, which would potentially assist AI security? I think this is probably a common issue anyway, that we still not getting the basics right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we see it all the time. Even before AI, it's always the basics, and it goes back to that gear acquisition syndrome. It's about acquiring more tools, but not necessarily fixing the things that already need to be fixed. And there is an awareness, and I think the bigger problem, it goes back to the resolution. It's like, we're not getting things fixed. We know what the problems are. We don't need more tools to tell us that, what's happening. We need somebody to go and actually fix it, to have ownership of those problems and prioritize what needs to be done.
And just a comment for me, the 42% who said there was somewhat confident of their AI security. My question to them is, what evidence-based assurance have you done to give you that confidence? And in my experience, we're not there. We're long by. We assume things are okay, but we're not doing that evidence-based assurance to give us that true confidence. So as with a lot of things, we've still got a lot of work to do. One quick one is, can you share information about the 300 organisations represented in the survey, i.e. industry, size, turnover, public sector, charity, SMEs, that kind of stuff? I think you did say that it was 300 large commercial organisations.
Yeah, specifically private sector organisations in this instance, but across finance, manufacturing, retail, and healthcare. But healthcare as in the kind of like the pharmaceutical rather than rather than NHS.
Yes, yeah. Okay, great. Thanks for that. So, thanks, Mark and Shaq, for a great conversation today. I'm sure this is going to be the first of many, because I think as we've seen in your presentation, is everybody's getting into AI. Have we got the governance and the basic management controls in place? No. So thanks, guys. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and hopefully we'll see you again real soon. Okay, thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.